Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Full Press Fantasy Live. Once again, I'm Kyle Senra on Twitter at Senra Says, and today we're going to talk about some Week 12 lineup decisions as we get closer and closer to the fantasy football playoffs. These wins will become more and more important each week as we go on. Just want to also mention the MyBookie double deposit match. If you use the code PRESS22, that's PRESS, all caps, and then the digits 22, so PRESS22. If you use that promo code, you can get a double deposit match up to $1,000, and that can be used on games today, for instance. The World Cup's going on right now. Canada historically scored their first ever goal at the World Cup tournament, so they're pretty excited, pretty pumped to already start the day well. Hoping to help some people here make some really key start-sit decisions. No bye weeks this week, and I felt my start-sit spreadsheet was just completely full this week. Just so many leagues where more players available, players coming back from injuries as well. So all to say, there's definitely some key decisions to be made. So I will share that and get that set up real quick. And and we'll start there. If there are any questions throughout the chat, feel free to share them, of course, on the Full Press Coverage YouTube page. And for now, though, I'm going to share some of my start-sit decisions and why why I'm making certain decisions. So go back to Thursday. George and I did a live special on Thursday, and George Carmey's not here this week. Washington Commanders do have a home game, and as a season ticket holder, he'll go to all those home games, and any of the 1 p.m. home games, he can't make it for these live streams. It's funny because we will talk Taylor Heineke in a sec, but to flashback to Thursday, I had 2 leagues with decisions to make, and part of it was, did I play players on Thursday? Namely, in the Scott Fish Bowl, the real big decision was Kalif Raymond. And I didn't play him. I ultimately pulled him out. I think part of it was the fact that I was already playing Jamal Williams. And so I thought, against the Bills, I really want to play 2 players against the Bills. Are the Lions going to score enough touchdowns to force that? I thought, who's the better play? I'll just play Williams. I'll bench Raymond, but that leaves a decision today. So for my third wide receiver, the decision, what we were talking about Thursday, was down to DeAndre Carter or Kalif Raymond. And I also have Greg Dortch and Terrace Marshall. Now, Greg Dortch is questionable. That'll be a later game. We'll know by the time I have to submit Carter if Dortch would be active or not. But honestly, if you look at the spreadsheet that I set up, and there's a few different categories. Production metrics are the first 3. Just what's the average fantasy points per game, and what is their range of outcomes they've had this year. Offensive line rank, which is Football Outsiders does split into run game, pass game. So usually it's adjusted sack rate for anyone except running backs. I think for today's purposes, I don't think there's any running. Well, there's one running back we might talk about, but so for Kareem Hunt, this ranking here, it's funny because it's the same rank as the Browns are ranked 10th in adjusted line yards, which measures the run game, and then adjusted sack rate. So that's a bad example, but sometimes you'll see that where 2 players on the same team, but one's a running back, one's a receiver, their offensive line rank will be different. The DVOA is the defensive DVOA for the team that they're facing, as well as, so these 2 are defensive metrics, the opponent they're facing, the matchup, the team total, and then the game total set by the odds makers, and then my goal line grade. And the goal line guide article is available on fullpresscoverage.com. You can read that every week. So the one thing I do want to just talk about here is that, you could easily see Carter leads most of these categories. So it kind of makes him an obvious choice. If you go back to Thursday's episode, when I had Kalif Raymond in, there were more categories where Raymond was leading, and it was more even, and it made it kind of a close decision. But going through and plugging this all in, it just says, play especially the better offense. Rather invest in the Chargers passing game than the Cardinals or the Panthers. I mean, this 26.25 goal line grade is the lowest of any team this week. It's also the lowest of any team since week 5. And that was also the Panthers back then. The problem with the Panthers is the goal line grade measures efficiency inside the 5-yard line. The Panthers are the only team in the NFL that has not thrown a touchdown inside their opponent's 5-yard line this year. So that's why that grade gets dragged down. You can see Marshall's last in most of these categories, but still makes an easy call for DeAndre Carter. This is also a decision where I had Noah Brown. I took Noah Brown out and it made it between these three: Traquan Smith, Zaccheaus, and Jordan Akins. Not a great decision. Not necessarily a league where it's a dynasty league. It's not necessarily a win now team. So to say, I got to have a winning record somehow. The team's not that great, but yeah, the last flex spot, I'll throw Jordan Akins in. It doesn't feel great, but it's not necessarily a league where I'll be forcing the issue. This league, however, I'm defending champ in this. I want to win again. I think my all-play record is, we play 2 matchups a week, but I think my all-play record is over 200 wins. I don't think anyone else has 200 wins yet, so pretty good team. Who's my QB2? Taylor Heinicke or Ryan Tannehill? And if anyone listened to the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week, Brad and I did debate this. And I did message Brad kind of, you know what, you might have been right. Because looking at the spreadsheet, there's a lot more factors that favor Heinicke. Specifically, a lot of it is around the matchup itself. Looking at the defensive DVOA, that's one of the biggest differences in this matchup. The Bengals pass defense -3, which means, 0 would represent average. You're allowing average production on a play-per-play basis as defense if your DVOA is 0. If it's negative, that means you're allowing less than average, which means it's a good defense, but bad matchup. And then conversely, above 0 means you're allowing more production. So not a good defense, but a good matchup if we're looking fantasy football for these purposes. So that's why at 18.4, that's far above average in terms of a production allowed by the Falcons in the passing game. So, and then you look at the points allowed. They've allowed the 25th fewest fantasy points. So we're going the other way. That's the eighth most. Yeah, the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks is what the Falcons have allowed. The Bengals have actually allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. So it's a really bad matchup for Tannehill. And maybe when I was doing my rankings initially, I didn't quite realize how bad of a matchup it was against the Bengals. You think, oh, okay, high-scoring offense will be forced to kind of pass. But it's funny, the game total is really not that high. It's not really saying shootout-type game. Better than Falcons Commanders, even though the defenses are so poor. But ultimately, you look at the production metrics, and this one was Tannehill against the Bills. So maybe you could almost take it out and kind of say the floor. Tannehill arguably probably has a better floor than Heinicke. But so far this year, Heineke's hit 25 points. Tannehill has not done that. Now, Tannehill's getting closer to his ceiling than his floor more often because his average is higher. So even though Heinicke technically has the higher floor and higher ceiling, Tannehill having the higher average means he's probably getting to that average more often than Heinicke is, or getting close to that ceiling anyway. Heinicke started off the year good. He's had 2 weeks below, in single-digit points, I believe, 2 weeks in a row. So I'm still leaning Tannehill in my gut, but the spreadsheet really does say Heinicke. So one thing I did in my rankings was I had Tannehill at 17, Heinicke at 25. I basically moved Tannehill down more. I moved Heinicke up a little bit. I think it's 21 and 23 now, but all to say they should have been closer in rankings. So maybe a little less confidence in Tannehill. I think I still have Tannehill in for now. I probably will stick with that and trust my gut, but because the one thing, again, statistically, Tannehill doesn't really have the floor, but if we were to take that out, it gives us, 4 categories for Heinicke, 5 for Tannehill, including the average and the goal line grade, though, and the touchdown upside, because this 48.5 is one of the lower ones this week. So, yeah, I think I'm still leaning Tannehill, but this is probably my toughest decision. And then I want to just touch on these two real quick. One of my other really tough decisions is Tyler Boyd versus DK Metcalf. This is a league where I could start up to 3 wide receivers if Jamar Chase is out. Now, if Jamar Chase is in, this is the only league I have Chase in. I'm just going to play him. He's too much upside, too much of a difference maker that if he's active, I'm playing him in the lineup. In which case, I would just start 2 wide receivers. And I think it's pretty easily Brandon Ayuk and Juju Smith-Schuster. I've got both of them ranked inside my top 20, I believe, or certainly inside my top 24. The other 3 are not. I think they're all pretty close. I think all 5 of these receivers are in my top 30 for wide receivers. But again, Ayuk and Juju are the only ones that are in the wide receiver 2 range, technically. I think Boyd, Metcalf, and Garrett Wilson, I think they're all between 25 and I think 30. I think Garrett Wilson is at wide receiver 30. So the first off, I've said this before, when there's complex decisions like this, I've got to pick 3 of these 5, the first or potentially 2 of these 5. The first thing I want to do is there an obvious case in either direction? Is there a really obvious must start, or is there a really obvious must sit? Now, Wilson was lowest in my rankings, and the spreadsheet just kind of confirmed that was the right call. Lowest average. He's got the lowest floor of everyone. It's funny. Chicago's allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but their DVOA is 21.6. So, we talked about the Falcons defense being poor. It's even worse for the Bears defense. The reason maybe that he gets docked here is that, Metcalf's playing the Raiders, and this 32.5, I think I mentioned this on Thursday episode, this is the worst in the league. So the Raiders defense could argue is the worst passing defense in the league. It's funny that their goal line grade for the Seahawks is actually better for the run game, because the Raiders' run defense and short yardage has been awful. So the Raiders have the worst overall passing defense and the worst short yardage run defense. They might be the worst defense in the league. So it kind of leans towards, when you're talking the matchup, Wilson's matchup against the Bears isn't that great compared to Metcalf's matchup against the Raiders. And then the game total. It's funny. I'm still shocked that, and it's the lowest of this group, but 22.25. It's come down, I think, by almost 2 points for the Jets, but they're still favored because the Bears, they've just been dropping them too. This 38.5 is pretty low for an implied total. So really low scoring game situation. Now, the one aspect is the goal line grade. The Jets have the 89.5, I think, is the highest this week of any team. Trying to remember. Yeah, because I think the Cowboys. Do I have a Cowboys player here? I guess I don't. I guess I should have put that for George's decisions. The Cowboys are really close to that. I think they're at 89.25. I think the Jets have the highest goal line grade for their passing game. Also plus 24 over their run game. One of the bigger differences this week, I think it might be the biggest difference. Or no, the Texans, I think, have the biggest difference at the passing game, but still. Jets really high goal line grade. So that's the one area where it might be good for Garrett Wilson, but ultimately there's not a lot of factors that favor him. So he seemed like he was the obvious bench. And then from there it was who came out the best if I was looking at just the other 4. If I had to pick just 2, let's say Chase plays, and I had to pick 2 of these 4, who are those guys? And Ayuk and Juju kind of come out on top in a lot of categories. I think that the key for them is they're really not the lowest in any category. Even if you take away Wilson, I suppose, all the places where he's the lowest, the next second lowest is actually usually Metcalf. Lowest average of the 4 remaining players, lowest floor of the 4 remaining players. It's funny how you'd think Metcalf, high ceiling guy, he hasn't put up a 20-point game this year. He is the lowest ceiling out of anyone. This is a half-point PPR league. But yeah, even the defensive matchup, he would technically have the. It's funny, talk about the Raiders defense being so bad, but they're basically middle of the pack in points allowed to wide receivers. So I guess it's coming from tight ends and running backs more. But yeah, I think for more than half the categories where Wilson's the lowest, Metcalf is the second lowest. So if you take out Wilson, Metcalf's the one that really suffers compared to everyone else. But all to say, Ayuk and Juju came out on top as kind of trusting my rankings. I had Ayuk to rank the highest of this group, and he has the highest average out of anyone by over a full point. So especially with Debo questionable, Ayuk could have maybe that's more attention from Lattimore, who I think is back. Well, we won't know that yet. That's a later game, but. All to say, I think Ayuk and Juju are the obvious plays, or not so much the obvious plays, but they're the plays that I've decided to go with. Those are the 2 guys. It looks like Juju Smith-Schuster. He's cleared concussion protocol. He's going to play. So then it really does come down to Tyler Boyd versus Metcalf. Again, if Jamar Chase is out. If Jamar Chase is in, it's easy. I'll just play Chase. Right now, I'm still leaning Metcalf. In my rankings, I think I had them 2 spots apart. Metcalf and Boyd. I think it's Metcalf at 25, Boyd at 27, something like that for wide receivers this week. And this is a half-point PPR league, so it would match perfectly with the rankings. So the rankings in my guts saying go with Metcalf. So yeah, I think that's probably where I will lean, but that's one I haven't fully decided. Last one I want to talk about is Tyler Conklin, Juwan Johnson. I have them, I think, 1 spot apart in my tight end rankings. I think they're tight end 7 and 8 respectively, or 8 and 9. And there are 2 leagues where I've got this decision. Do I play Conklin or do I play Johnson? And the first league, Moneyballers, this is a salary cap contract league. The other one's just a standard redraft league. So what I've done is, different scoring settings to these leagues. One's just a half-point PPR. The other one is has points per first down. So you'll notice usually the second time is always the highest for this D2 league. Again, the points, half point per first down does kind of lead to you see that both players' averages are higher in that second league. Same with their ceilings. They both put up a 0 at times this year, so it's tough to judge them based on the floor. My initial instinct was going to be, okay, is there an edge to have where I split the difference, play Conklin in one and play Juwan Johnson in the other? My rankings initially had Conklin, and then through the spreadsheet, most of the categories, Conklin's favored over Johnson. So the interesting dynamic here was actually with the defensive rankings. Both defenses do not allow a lot of points to tight ends. So it's not really a great matchup either way, although the DVOA does definitely favor the matchup against the Bears defense as opposed to the 49ers defense. And I mean, the odds makers implied totals with the Jets higher than what the Saints have, even though the game total is higher for the Saints 49ers, which in theory would favor the pass catchers and tight ends, maybe more touchdowns thrown. But anyway, it's funny how with the points per first down, once you add that in, the Bears go from the 5th fewest fantasy points allowed to the 3rd fewest. And then whereas the 49ers go from the 3rd fewest without the first down points to the 4th fewest. So it's telling me, I guess, the Bears, like they're both not allowing very much tight ends, but maybe the Bears are allowing less first downs to the tight end. So in theory, I could go with that first down league and really split the difference and play Juwan Johnson. But again, you're talking about the 3rd fewest to the 4th fewest. So it's not even like it's that great of a matchup. Part of me, I think what I'm leaning right now is trust my gut. I had Conklin ranked ahead of Johnson before I did my spreadsheet. And through this, it's kind of saying a lot more categories where Conklin's favored. I'm thinking of just going with Conklin in both. I know I've got Juwan Johnson started in a few other leagues anyway. Probably 2 of my most rostered tight ends at this point, alongside George Kittle, and I think TJ Hawkinson. Like those would be the 4 that I'm playing the most of. So even if these 2 specific leagues I go with Conklin over Johnson, I'm still going to have enough Juwan Johnson exposure. So I think that's what I'm leaning right now. So we're getting close to time for 11:45 is usually when I find the actives and actives are up. But we have one question here. XN3 on 1C3X. I'm not sure why I read the full name, but I like numbers. So Rachaad White or Chris Olave in PPR? I'm a huge fan of Rachaad White. I love the player. I thought his combine metrics were incredible. His production metrics last year were insane in college. The rest of his career, not so much, but he hadn't done much. But last year, he put up a ton of numbers. And I had him as the rookie RB3. Now, even in rookie drafts, I still would have gone Olave over White, but that's not what's being talked about here. This is 1 week decision now that Rachaad White is getting the start. No Leonard Fournette. Is him being a workhorse back against the Browns enough to go over Olave? I tend not to think so. In full PPR, I know it's a tough matchup against the 49ers, but I also could see because it's such a tough matchup to run against them, the Saints are going to have no choice but to throw a ton. Now, it seems like with Rachaad White, it's a favorable matchup against the Browns' run defense, which isn't very good. I have a hard time benching Olave, though. I think the volume of passes and targets he gets, the clear alpha on that team, and it seems like even if Dalton's benched for Winston, Olave's put up great weeks with Winston. So I don't think there's much risk on the quarterback. And again, the risk there is all just the matchup. Are the 49ers defense so tough that the Saints can't do anything? I'm not as convinced of that, but I understand the risk. I understand the consideration for going White. Personally, I would still play Olave. I think he's in a point where he's producing where it's so tough to bench him. If it was half point PPR, that might be enough to lean me towards the running back. But full point PPR, I think even given a full workload for Rachaad White, I could still see Olave outscoring him. So I would go Chris Olave. That'd be an interesting one to plug into the spreadsheet, however. But yes. Too bad George isn't here to bounce that idea off. But I guess I'm feeling like Olave is in that must-start territory every week. And while Rachaad White, he's probably elevated to a must-start player this week. You got 2 must-start players. You can afford to bench one, right? And I think as much as I would, get the opportunity to play White there, I would still go Olave. But that one's probably really close. So I understand why that question was asked. The one thing I will want to go check now, I think, is the active and inactive list. So let me go pull that up. Canada is playing right now, so part of me is thinking, okay, let's especially if there's not too many questions. I think I probably will aim to get this done closer to 12 noon as opposed to 12:30. So let me pull that up, and we'll talk about which players are in or out. It's funny, we don't usually do the Broncos. I'm trying to think of the last time I had the Broncos here because they're always on prime time. But yeah, Broncos, Panthers, we're going to start there. Jerry Jeudy's out, as is KJ Hamler and Alberto Quibenon. I think at this point, Dulcich is very clearly the lead tight end. He's the one of the few players I'd play over both Conklin and Juwan Johnson. For the wide receivers, that leaves Cortland Sutton as the main guy, Kendall Hinton, and I guess Jalen Virgil, whatever his name is. I think he'll be the wide receiver 3. So yeah, against the Panthers, it's tough because this game total is really low. I think it's like 36, 37, 36 and a half, something like that for the over under. It's the lowest of this week. I'm pretty sure it's the lowest we've had of any game all season. So not a lot of points expected. So outside of Cortland Sutton, I really don't want to trust too many players. Like I really don't want to play Wilson either. Losing Jeudy doesn't help. Or not having Jeudy doesn't help. I mean, I'm pretty sure he missed last week too. So tough to trust too many Broncos players. Sutton, Latavius Murray, that's probably, and Dulcich. Those 3 are the only Broncos players I really want to play. For the Panthers, PJ Walker's out, still with that injury. And once all 3 are healthy, who knows who's going to be 1, 2, 3 between him, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. We know Sam Darnold starting this week. I don't want to play any Panthers wide receivers. I think the only Panthers player I want to play is Deontay Foreman. That's it. I don't know that there's any other, even DJ Moore. I know one of actually, I guess I could go back to the spreadsheet because I do have a DJ Moore decision. I guess I could share with people as I share my screen. Yeah, here it is. One of the few leagues, because I'm going to be benching Deontay in a lot of leagues. You can see 3 decisions here, and only one of those I'm actually going with Deontay in the lineup. But 3 flex spots: Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Carter, DJ Moore, Ben Skowronek, and Mac Hollins. Skowronek was actually kind of an easy throwaway kind of bench. So then it really just came down to the other 4. I had 3 spots available. Who was I going to play? And it's funny how through the spreadsheet, DeAndre Carter kind of came out the best. So as much as, okay, with Keenan Allen back, what kind of roles he going to have? That's uncertain. I think I'd still definitely go Carter. And then this will be the league where I play Deontay. I'll play guys like Kareem Hunt, Drake London, Donovan Peoples-Jones over Deontay. Deontay to DJ Moore, though, I'm going with Deontay. I've got him ranked higher than DJ Moore. I might have DJ Moore outside the top 50 this week. I don't want any part of this matchup against the Broncos, honestly. This negative 18.6 DVOA, it's not the worst in the league, but it's down there. Eagles at minus 22.7. I still don't even think that's the worst. Here it is. The Patriots, 27.6. So it's not the worst passing defense in the league, but it's definitely down there. And I think in terms of defensive rank, Sleeper doesn't have it, so that's why a few of these leagues are blank. But I'm pretty sure the Broncos are like the fewest points or the second fewest points allowed. And yeah, here it is, 36.5 implied over under. So yeah, I'm definitely benching DJ Moore wherever I have him. I think that might be the only league where I have him. Anyway, so moving on to the Buccaneers and Browns, as this question kind of indicates, Rachaad White is getting starter consideration because Leonard Fournette is out. Kyle Rudolph, Russell Gage also out. So starters are Rachaad White. Obviously, you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin there. Julio Jones also as a third wide receiver. I guess Cameron Brate's back then. So you'll be Brate and Otten splitting. I don't really love playing either of those two. So yeah, I think on the Browns side, nothing really major here. Demetric Felton at running back is inactive, which Jerome Ford is kind of active as the 4th guy. So it's funny. It's interesting that they're making 4 running backs active between Chubb, Hunt, Dearness Johnson, and Jerome Ford. But it is what it is for the Browns. Interesting because you'd see the Buccaneers, you'd think, okay, you have to be very pass heavy against that front, but maybe the Browns. The Browns goal line grade is really good. It's the highest for any run team, 82. think it's 82.25, and that puts it at like the third or fourth highest overall the entire week. I mentioned the Jets, Cowboys, and I think Saints are the only ones with higher grades. And that's all for the passing game. So for the run game, the Browns are the highest because the Buccaneers, they haven't. The thing is, like, they haven't had too many opportunities against them inside the 5, but teams have scored at like a 60% rate of touchdowns on carries inside the 5 against the Buccaneers. It's a small sample size, so maybe it's a little skewed, but that is kind of where the Browns are favored, right? They always want to run more, so I think it's a good run game actually against the Buccaneers this week. Ravens, Jaguars. So on the Ravens side, Gus Edwards will be active today. So Mike Davis out as a response. Also, only 2 tight ends active: Mark Andrews and I just had it now. I've lost it. Josh Oliver, with Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler both inactive. Unfortunately, though, for the Ravens, Ronnie Stanley is inactive at left tackle after just getting him back this year. It looked like he was finally playing good, coming off an injury from last season, out again. So it's unfortunate for the Ravens. I'd play Gus Edwards. I think he's, as the main guy, he's probably the only Ravens running back I want to play. You'll have Drake active, Justice Hill active. I don't really want to play either of those two. Speaking of running backs, the Jaguars just acquired Darrell Henderson. He was cut by the Rams. Jaguars put a claim in, got him, but he is inactive. So I didn't rank him this week. I kind of had the impression that they were going to bring him up slowly, and it's still Travis Etienne and JaMycal Hasty, but mostly Travis Etienne. One of the things we talked about in the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week was how high to rank Travis Etienne. I am at running back 3. So I think Etienne's going to smash against the Ravens defense. Brad, even though he's a Jaguars fan, had him, RB11. So still must play, but maybe not as high upside as some other players. But for the Jaguars, that is it in terms of, there's wide receiver Kendrick Pryor is also inactive. He hasn't been doing much this year. So that's not going to affect, say Christian Kirk or Zay Jones or Marvin Jones or any of the established receivers already there. All right, Houston Texans. It's funny. We go from the Jaguars acquiring Darrell Henderson. The Texans recently acquired Eno Benjamin after he was cut by an NFC West team. So it's kind of funny how that's coincidence working. But Benjamin's also inactive again. So mostly to Dameon Pierce, and Rex Burkhead is the main backup. I guess Dario Gumbawale would also be active. Tight end inactive, Brevin Jordan. So back to why playing Jordan Akins. I don't love it though, because there's still OJ Howard. There's who else is there? Quentin Tarantino, whatever his name is. There's 3 or 4 guys splitting. So I'm playing Akins in one league, but I wouldn't really recommend him as a starter. Like, he's not ranked inside my top 25 this week. That's more just a desperation flex spot, plug and play. Like, that would have been Raheem Mostert's spot if he was active. Like, I wouldn't have even needed to make that decision. If Mostert was active, I would have had an extra running back in, but no other running backs to really fill him in. So, not so super excited about Texans tight ends. I'm excited about the wide receivers, Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins specifically. Dolphins. So Teddy Bridgewater's inactive. So as mentioned, Raheem Mostert's also inactive. Hunter Long and Eric Uzakama at tight end and wide receiver, respectively, also inactive. So it's interesting who's going to be the main backup to Jeff Wilson. Will it be Salvin Ahmed? Will it be Myles Gaskin? Will Gaskin take away some of Jeff Wilson's pass catching role? That's probably going to be likely, but maybe against the Texans, they're looking just to run a lot anyway. I think their rushing goal line grade is one of the higher ones. Not the Browns, but I think it's 70. It's in the high 70s, so probably the second or third highest run grade overall. So should be a good week for Jeff Wilson, all to say. Inside the top 20 for me, and the news of Mostert being out, I moved Wilson up in my rankings. I think he was outside the top 20, and now he's inside the top 20. So moved him up, I think, 5-6 spots, maybe 7 spots. I guess for the Bears, big news, actually for both quarterbacks, Zach Wilson and Justin Fields inactive. Now, Zach Wilson's being benched, but for the Bears, Justin Fields is out with an injury. So that's one where Trevor Siemian will get the start. Wasn't necessarily high on Cole Kmet or Darnell Mooney anyway, but probably look to, I don't know, maybe they're playable. Maybe they actually does mean higher passing volume. So maybe it's actually okay to play Mooney and Kmet. David Montgomery is the main back, should get most of the carries for the team, so I think he's also a really good play. N'Keal Harry's out, by the way, so the other 2 wide receivers anyway, behind Darnell Mooney are Dante Pettis and Equinemius St. Brown. I don't know if I'd play them, though. I don't think Trevor Siemian is that much of a difference maker that I'd go and elevate those guys. But yeah, the main three weapons, Kmet, Mooney, Montgomery, those guys I think are playable. Oh, this is interesting. So for the Jets, not only is Zach Wilson inactive, James Robinson's inactive. I think I've got I'm going to have to pull him out of a couple lineups, I think. So maybe a really good week for Michael Carter then against the Bears. This could be something. I guess Ty Johnson would be the main backup, and Zonovan Knight, I believe, would be the third string guy. So I don't know if Zonovan Knight's going to get any carry, but yeah, I guess big week for Michael Carter here. For the Bengals, so the easy decision is not made. I think they announced that this was probably going to be the case yesterday, but officially announced Jamar Chase is out. So, and Joe Mixon's out with a concussion, so Samaje Perine gets the start at running back. Wide receiver, the main two are still Higgins and Boyd. In that league where I've got Boyd and Chase is out. I think I'm still going Metcalf over Boyd, but that would probably be the third option there. For the Titans, I guess nothing really major. There are a few defensive players. So I don't know that it's necessarily. I don't love the matchup for Perine, but maybe it's an okay matchup. D'Amico Autry, Joe Schobert. So those are a couple front seven players they're not going to have. So maybe it's a little easier for Perine. Like for instance with Jeff Wilson, I'd much rather play Jeff Wilson and David Montgomery over Samaje Perine, just for players we've recently been talking about. For the Falcons and the Commanders, nothing really major. Really for the Commanders, it's more defensive players: Chase Young and Benjamin Saint-Just. Benjamin Saint-Just. I should pronounce the whole name properly in French. I can say Benjamin pretty easily in English, but you see the last name. It's like there's no good way to pronounce that in English. So Saint-Just. That's how it should be. Benjamin Saint-Just and Chase Young both out. So does it help for the Falcons? I suppose. I think for the Falcons, it's not even the matchup you're so much worried about. It's for the pass catchers anyway. It's the quarterback and the offense not being so pass heavy. I think for the Falcons perspective, I would definitely play Patterson. That's probably it. Like, he's really the only Falcons player I automatically want to start. I know with Pitts out, it might be exciting to put Drake London in. I'll have him in most leagues. Although if we went back to the spreadsheet, the half. I mentioned there's a league with a half point per first down, favoring the running backs to a certain extent. I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt over Drake London. And that's it for the actives, inactives. So again, the big news, I guess, is Justin Fields is out, but also James Robinson's out, and then Chase Young fully confirmed being out. So make sure you get those players out of your lineups. Leonard Fournette out. Rachaad White's getting the start. So I guess, Rachaad White and Jeff Wilson are kind of in a similar interesting range there. So again, I want to get back to the Canada World Cup game. Want to see if they're still winning. So going to leave this a little early. I made it to 12:05, so I'll give you a little 5 minutes extra than I was planning. But really appreciate everyone who did watch and join. Appreciate the one question comment we got, which again, as much as Rachaad White's getting the start, I'd still lean Chris Olave even against the 49ers defense. But maybe my bias there is that I view Olave as, once he started that early stretch at the start of the season, it's okay. He's in the lineup every week the rest of the year. Maybe that bias still exists, but I still think production-wise he could do really well, just because I think it'll be so hard to run against the 49ers. I think I made that argument with Brad on the Full Press Fantasy Pod. He had Garoppolo ranked higher than Dalton. I had Dalton ranked higher, thinking I think the 49ers win, which is why I want the other quarterback needing to pass more. And I think that goes to it here. But yes, you can follow along on Twitter. I'm at Senra Says. As I mentioned, the Full Press Fantasy Pod, you can follow that account at FPC_Fantasy Pod. My co-host Brad Harvin and I, we do a weekly episode where we talk about our rankings. This week we talked about some trades, and because we actually recorded on Friday, we were able to kind of recap the Thursday games and what specifically some of those players, did we see anything unusual that we could kind of take going the rest of the season. So definitely a good listen, I think. And again, at FPC_Fantasy Pod for all those episodes. I think we did a poll this week on Jalen Waddle. I've got him at wide receiver 6. Brad has him at wide receiver 20. So again, you can check the pin tweet, the thread there with the episode and the poll to go along with it. So I guess the plan will be to be back next week. No Thanksgiving every week. It was fun to do a Thursday episode with George, but yeah, we'll be back. I believe George should be back next Sunday, which will be we'll be into December. So fantasy playoffs right around the corner. At this point we're probably 3 weeks from most fantasy playoffs. I think some leagues maybe even is week 14. Scott Fishbowl playoffs are starting this week, so there's larger leagues where that larger main event type leagues are combine not just a 12-team league, but you've got your 12-team league within a bigger league. Those types of leagues, the playoffs will tend to start earlier, but most conventional league scoring settings, you'll have week 15 or potentially 14 at the earliest starts for the playoffs. So you still got 2-3 weeks of regular season to go get those wins, try and chase those first round buys or get into the playoffs and secure those spots. So hopefully everyone going through my process, how I kind of decide my start sit decisions. I hope that helps inspire people and can help them make decisions. Appreciate everyone for listening and watching to another episode of Full Press Fantasy Live. I'm Kyle Senra. See you all next week.